Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I've got a reel in a bag project on a Penn Fierce IV. It's the latest version of the Penn Fierce, and it came in because it had a seized spool that was frozen to the axle shaft. And you can see some of the scarring that's gone on here. Well, it took a little while to work it off, and makes me question what this spool is actually made of. You would think it's aluminum, maybe it is. But what happened was the spool got on the shaft, and then this whole bottom line here became encrusted with salt. And well, what happened was it froze onto whatever this metal is, and he couldn't turn the spool. He had no drag washers. Well, we removed the drag washers piece by piece, and then we used a lot of solvents like penetrating oil and that to break up the salt, and finally I was able to get that off. But the fellow asked me while I was at it if I could put it back together for him and, well, give it a tune-up. So let's do that, particularly since it's the latest model of the Fierce. I think one of the things I found already was I don't know what the composite metal is in that spool, but I don't think I like it. And also, this reel, it's kind of interesting. It uses the drag washers as the eared washers. You'll notice the little studs on the drag washers, where normally you would see the studs for the eared washer on the metals. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but we're going to take this reel apart completely. We're going to show you how to service it, how to put it back together again for Ray. That's Ray's reel. And, well, get this one to have a second chance. Well, if you like these types of videos, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to the channel, please use that notification button. That notification button will let you know when I'm posting a video, and well, you'll be able to see if that's a video that you would enjoy watching. This one's a 5,000 size spinning reel. It's generally used from surf or in the ocean from a boat or a pier. Can also be used in deep lakes, of course, and rivers where you can cast long. Well, to remove the axle shaft, we want to remove the side plate screws, and you have to remove that bump guard first. These are Phillips head screws, and well, there's usually a little plastic washer underneath them as well. So when you're taking these out, just be aware that you should see a washer under there. He tells me that the reel hasn't been serviced before, so we should find those. You'll either find them on the screw or like it is there in the case. That's to help keep water out. Well, whatever it is, it didn't keep water out of the top of the spool, and that's not unusual because a top drag fishing reel, the line is coming over the brim of that spool, and it's usually wet line, and that wet line normally, well, it sheds water as it's coming in, and shedding the water usually goes behind that drag adjuster knob, seeps down into the spool, and a lot of times, well, it has nowhere to go. That's what it looks like happened here. It looks like there was a lot of salt water that came in and had nowhere to go and started eating away at the base of the spool there. Okay. Well, we've got 3 screws. They're the same size. I'm going to take my pieces and parts off. I check for that first, and then I put all my pieces and parts into a parts tray. Today I'm using a fast food container as my parts tray. But whatever it is you choose to use as your parts organization system, just make sure that you have it in a way that you're going to remember where the pieces are, where they belong on the reel, and when it comes time to reinstall, you won't have those issues with, well, like this one, becoming a reel in a bag because something didn't go back the way it should. Well, what's one of the ways to help with that? Well, take pictures. If you take pictures along the way, you'll have a visual record of what you removed, when you removed it, and the orientation of those pieces and parts when you did. So I'm going to take that axle shaft and put that in there with the 2 crosswind block screws. This is a good place for a picture. Notice you got a big bearing on here. That's a shielded bearing, not a sealed bearing. We have our main gear, our crosswind block, and underneath that is the oscillation gear. The main gear should be able to come out now. And even though it's a relatively new reel, you'll see it's pretty much dry of grease. So whatever period of time that Ray's been fishing it, it's time for a service. I get asked frequently what's the general service interval? And my recommendation is at a minimum once a year. Do it before or before the season starts or after the season ends. And that'll keep it trouble-free. Now, I don't know. He tells me that he's rinsed it off, and I'm going to trust that he has, but I don't know how that water got into the spool cylinders. I do know what the result was. Well, this is the sticky goo kind of stuff. I'm going to use a cotton swab to get that off. Again, we have a crosswind block, essentially, or crosswind gear, essentially no grease on there. And you can see I was mopping up inside the case. So what's happened here is that centrifugal force has spun the grease off the gears, and well, it's nested in the case, and it's not doing anybody any good in that case there. All right. Well, this is version 4. I think the version 4, it's gone to a CNC cut gear, and I believe that it's gone to an extra bearing in the reel. So it's very much like the Penn Battle was before its latest edition there. So we have a metal case on this one. If you've got the Pursuit, it's pretty much the same reel, only it's got a graphite case. The metal case will be stiffer, and it will help you against flex if and when you're fishing. All right, we've cleaned up the main gear. I'm going to leave that right on my desk here. I'm going to oil this bearing that we took off. And underneath that bearing, you're going to notice that there's a series of shim washers. In this case, there's 3 shim washers. That's to take up the slack in the side-to-side movement of the main gear, because, well, manufacturing tolerances do vary, and sometimes there's a tighter fit than other times in that reel. Okay, I've let that penetrating oil sit for a moment. It's softened up the grease that's left in the case, so we'll just continue with the mop up there. We got one more thing we want to do here, and that's to take the top part of this reel off. Okay, to take the top part of the reel off, there's a tie down that's holding on the rotor nut. I think what we'll do is we'll put these parts in the parts tray. It's just getting to the point now where something may just get bounced around there, so it makes sense just to put them in there so that we don't lose those. Take the hold down clip off. I believe this is a 14mm nut. Nope, it's the 15. In this case, we can use an open-end wrench because the lip is not that deep. If it was deeper, what you would like to do is use a deep socket to get there. Notice that there is a little plastic ferrule that goes inside the pinion gear, and with those 2 pieces removed, we can remove the rotor. Rotor service is not much. If it's working and the bail is retrieving and all you need to do is put a little bit of oil, and we'll use that penetrating oil right on the seams and on that line roller. Just work it in a couple of times. Underneath here is the metal trip for your bail. If you like, you can put a little bit of oil in there, but that's nothing more than a steel rod that's going up, and well, unless there's some kind of dirt and debris in there, you generally don't need to touch that. 2 things going on now with this anti-reverse backup. First is that we have a collar, and on that collar you're going to notice that there's a right-angled piece of spring. That spring is going to go into the hole in the bottom here. So if it's become detached, you just want to reset that just like that, and then put that off to the side. That's going to activate this anti-reverse dog. That's a backup, and you'll see the serrated teeth inside the rotor, and that's what the tip of this is going to catch as a fail-safe backstop. We also have a shim washer that came off the top of that assembly. That's going to be between the tie down and your rotor. There's 3 screws here. I'll take a picture of this. This is not the same setup. And actually, I think this is on wrong. I'm going to guess it's on wrong, because this flat side here should give clearance over here on that anti-reverse stall. Since he told me it hasn't been serviced, I'll make a point of thinking that maybe the guy or gal who put this reel together in the factory missed. I'm sure it happens. We're going to take the 3 of these out to reveal the stack. Again, these are Phillips head screws, and a number 1 driver generally will help you to remove those. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, if you leave those questions in the comments section, I will try to answer those for you. This one's showing the complete disassembly and service of the reel. I have other videos out there that show other things, and well, if you need a reference point, leave that there. This is a sealed bearing. You do not need to service that. We have the bearing and a collar. Notice on the bottom of the collar there is a recess. That's because the inner ring for your anti-reverse is proud of that anti-reverse. It sticks out. And then we have a shielded bearing underneath. So take pictures there so that you know when it's time to reinstall where they go. Wipe this down, check the grooves in the pinion gear. This one has a little bit of dried grease in it, so I'm using an awl to scratch that out. And I'll wipe that on a paper towel so I don't transfer that to the next project. With this done, we're going to grease that up again. We're going to use fishing reel grease, and I only recommend that you use fishing reel grease. This is Penn's Precision Reel Grease. So it comes on the reel. And I'm not using it because of that. It just happens to be that I use that on almost all of the fishing reels that I service. But I do recommend that you use fishing reel grease only. Grease the bottom of your pinion gear where the teeth are. And the next one up is an anti-reverse clutch and an inner collar. This has 2 sides on it. One is plastic, one is metal. The metal faces up. The collar has got a square on it. So you're going to make sure that you align that rectangle with the square sides of the pinion gear. Before we do that, the bottom bearing goes on. That's the one that is not shielded. Then we can take the collar and the anti-reverse. And what you want to do as you're doing this is clean your pieces and parts. You don't want to transfer old dirt into this. We have the recessed bottom here. That goes on next. And that is your restored pinion gear assembly. Well, there's a little bit of grease on the outside here, so let's just mop that up, mop up the inside. And now we can restore the pinion gear assembly. Bring it in and make sure that it is flush with the top of that. And as I said, this should be, that flat side should go over towards the anti-reverse so that it doesn't interfere with the swing. I think we want it this way. That's where the pictures probably would tell, but the pictures were out of sequence anyway, so it's kind of hard. Start your screws. Those of you that know me know these little small screws, know that we're in for an adventure. Again, if you had any question on this, you're going to go back and look at your pictures. That will tell you where these came from. Okay, tighten that one down. We got 2 more of these. So these are nice reels. They're in their 4th generation now. That's what this one is. It's the Fierce IV. And as I mentioned, I think the only thing here is the addition. I think it's a extra bearing in the spool. And this is me in small screws. So if you're looking for time to replenish your drink, this is probably a good time to do that. Okay, that's the second one. One more. I think the pricing points on these, I think the Pursuit is probably the entry level. The Fierce is probably $10 to $15 more than the Pursuit is, and the Battle's probably $10 or $15 more than the Fierce is. And again, there's not much differentiation between all three models. The case is the main difference on the Fierce and the Pursuit, and the difference on the Battle is the extra bearing, or CNC cut gears now, I believe. All right, find a little slot. Make sure you put that 90-degree spring arm into that slot. Then bring the assembly over your pinion gear and match that slot to the post that's in the anti-reverse dog, just like that. And then we have the little washer that goes on top of that, and we can bring our rotor over. After you bring your rotor over, you have that little ferrule that goes inside the pinion gear. And we have a rotor nut. And I like this rotor nut. This rotor nut has a kind of a cap top to it where you can't over tighten it. Tighten that down. Give it a spin. Make sure that it spins the way it should. That's spinning nicely. And then we can move to the lower end of the assembly once we put this little hold down on. So bring your hold down clip in. That's going to keep your rotor nut from loosening up. Almost lost that one. Get the screw that holds that down. Conveniently located in my parts tray right next to where I had the hold down clamp. Again, a good system of organization for your pieces and parts will make your job a whole lot easier. Okay, let's just tighten that down. Tighten down, now we can go and reinstall the balance. I'm going to start with our oscillation gear. We've cleaned it. Now we want to make sure that we get some grease on it. Now you don't have to get grease in every tooth, but get a good amount of grease in the teeth, front, and then along the back where it's going to run against that stud. When you install the oscillation gear, make sure you bring the stud all the way to the bottom of the case. That'll make it easier to reinstall your crosswind block, which is next. This only needs grease in the slot and on the face. That's the only parts that will be touching anything. Set that crosswind block over the stud. And then we can go to our main gear. We'll do the same thing. Going to grease the back teeth, which are going to drive that oscillation gear, and then grease the front teeth, which is going to drive the pinion gear. Now you can't get this gear out before unless you remove the axle shaft. That's because your axle shaft is riding here and it'll bounce in and out, but you won't be able to pull that gear out and interfere. So you reverse that when you're reinstalling. Alright, we've oiled that back bearing in the case. Main gear goes in. Now we can put a light coating of grease onto the axle shaft. Find the flat side of the axle shaft that will face towards you. Bring it down through the slot and then merge it into the crosswind block so that you can see the holes here for those two tie-down screws. Go to your case and get those two tie-down screws. and that'll connect the axle shaft through the crosswind block. And now when that oscillation gear goes round and round and the stud goes up and down, your axle shaft will go up and down, which the axle shaft will be holding the spool, so the spool will go up and down too. In this case it was going up and down, but it was frozen. You had no drag, or you had all drag rather. It was locked in place. Okay, we've oiled this bearing. That goes on after you've put the shim washers on. Now we can wipe off the case. Again, nice metal case here. The case just simply goes on, and when you put that case on, make sure you have a nice tight seal all the way around. If something is sticking or binding, or you have a space there, something inside is loose or not installed properly, and you're going to need to identify that. Don't try and tighten down the case thinking that's going to pull something that's out of balance into play. That won't work. You'll probably wind up breaking something. Okay, there was a plastic washer was seated in that little groove there. Same with this one down here. Again, those little plastic washers are seal washers for keeping water out. Cases these days have gotten a lot better in terms of avoiding damage from water intrusion. Early reels, well, they just got flooded, right? And an old salt's trick, if you will, was to overload the case with grease so that it would displace the water. Well, you don't need to do that these days. Manufacturers have kind of done it. Some of the higher end models of Penn will have a rubber gasket inside between this case that we're putting on and the other side of the frame. Thinking of the slammers and the spin fishers and the later models. Alright, one more of these. This is the bump guard. It's meant to shatter before your case shatters. So if you hit that something like on a pier wall or on the gun wall of a boat or something, you don't break the reel body, you would just break that cap. And I just had 2 reels come in the other day. Both of them had broken bump guards. So of course, me being me, had to ask the fellow what in the world he's been fishing that would cause that. Okay, we have a series of Carbon-Tex washers, a series of metal washers, and we have a plastic washer, which is the shim washer for the spool that fits over the axle shaft. I'm going to use a fishing wheel grease on these washers just because I know the experience that the fellow has had. They're still in good condition. I'm going to use what's called Cal's Universal Drag Grease. Now don't panic. If you don't have drag grease, don't sweat it. You can use fishing wheel grease. The idea with those is to keep them flexible so that they don't dry out. Alright, first one in is a fabric washer. Next one in is one of these round washers. Noting on this one that all of the round washers are the same, so it doesn't matter on the sequence here. Again, another drag washer goes in. Those points fit in the recesses of the spool. Put the second of these drag washers in. Just trying to turn that a little bit. Visually line it up with the one before it. Makes it easier to put it on the post. And then we'll do the last one. I use my glove as a tool. I put a little bit of grease on and then I rub it around. I make sure that I don't overload the washer. You need to see the cross hatching through the grease. If you put more than that in, you're just wasting it. The pressure of the drag adjuster knob going down on the spool will simply squeeze it off to the side, and well, that won't be any good for anything. Alright, here's your little clip. There is a recess right above that last washer. This is a hold fast clip, so find a spot, work the first tip into the slot, then work it around. It's not a very heavy tension clip. That's how it works, and that's just a retention clip to hold that in. Alright, we're going to put the spool back on now. And we can grab our drag adjuster. Looks like there's a little bit of dirt on the rubber 4 here. Probably makes sense. I've been fighting this thing for a while. Okay, let's tighten this down. Now the issue here wasn't that it didn't hold, it's holding now. The issue was it didn't release. There we go. So now we have a functioning releasable drag. Okay, one more piece here is the handle to be installed, and we'll give it a final test here. A little bit of oil onto the little shaft here that holds the spacer for your handle, and it allows it to collapse. You install the handle in the direction that it is going to crank. Make sure that it threads nice and smooth. Lock it in, and we're ready for a test. So what have we done? We've taken the reel completely apart. We examined the pieces and parts. You didn't see me remove the drag washers from the spool, but they do come out just as you saw. And well, they were corroding on the bottom. That salt has been cleaned off. It was superficial, but it just jammed it enough that it wouldn't allow that spool to turn. We've re-cleaned everything, re-greased everything, and now it's just ready for that final test. So this is your Penn Fierce IV 5,000 sized reel. It spins nice and easy. Bail clicks nice and easy. And as we mentioned, the issue before was we did not have any play in the drag. Well, we have that play now. And then once we tighten it down, rock solid. Back it off. Again, so you don't squeeze the lubrication out of that spool, and you're ready to go fishing. I hope you've enjoyed that. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. I appreciate your efforts day in and day out and your dedication to service. Well, it's another reel in the books, another one given a second chance. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you haven't subscribed, I would like you to consider that again. And if you do subscribe, please use that notification button. Finally, if you like this video, please like it on the YouTube click. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody a great day.